Hi there, I'm Dean Heskin, and you are tuned into our podcast, The Secret War on Cash, brought to you by Swiss America Trading Corporation, who's been serving the country, actually the world, for over 40 years now, getting people physically and profitably involved and invested into precious metals. If you'd like more information on that, actually, which we usually cover this at the end of the hour, but cover it at the top now, you can call us or text us to learn more about that at 1-800-289-2646. And you can also visit us online at www.swissamerica.com. So to talk about some of the whys you should be buying gold, I have with me my co-host, Chris Agelastos, and we're going to look at some of the things that are happening. And in some cases, people may not even be aware these things are happening because, I'd say, in my opinion, I've been dealing in the financial world, if you will, and investments, et cetera, Chris, since 1991. Mm-hmm. And I would say more than ever, just within the last, we'll say 2 to 4 years, specifically the last 2 years, there's been a huge shift to where, we've always had our domestic markets, you always had our global markets, but the convergence of the two, it's kind of a fine line anymore. The difference between, something that is looked at upon as a domestic issue and something that's looked at as a global issue when it comes to finance, because currencies and everything just trade so fluidly back and forth, et cetera. Now, this being said, one of the big shifts or changes now, and this is important too, and I should have done a little more research or homework, just off the top of my head, I don't remember, but BRICS expansion in 2026. We're going to talk about that from Watcher Guru. Now, BRICS and pinball, forgive the nicknames, Chris. I've said I'd never.
Quite all right. I've been called worse.
I know that. So here's the thing. BRICS, I don't remember the exact date. I don't think it was in the 90s. I thought it was in the early 2000s that BRICS was originally established. Do you recall?
Yeah, I think 05, 06. It was somewhere near there.
Okay, so let's just go with somewhere in the early 2000s. Mm-hmm. BRICS was established. And it kind of, for lack of a better term, lay dormant for many, many years. It was there, but really wasn't doing anything. Yeah. And then within the last roughly, is it getting probably closer to 4 years now than not, mm-hmm. all of a sudden out of nowhere, it just seems like, boom, it became this living, breathing, pretty big organism all unto itself. Yep. And so that gets into this area of BRICS expanding. What we look at here is BRICS expansion 2026, which countries want to join as their summit approaches. And we've been following mm-hmm. these summits for the last few years now. So as we look at these countries that are wanting to, become now involved with BRICS, and I'll read you here: Belarus, Bolivia, Cuba, Kazakhstan, Malaysia, Nigeria, Thailand, Uganda, mm-hmm. and this one I'm not familiar with. Uzbekistan?
Uzbekistan, yeah.
Uzbekistan. Okay. So when we look at this, it's just more that are being added to the list. Yeah. So tell us why countries would want to what's the draw? What's the allure of them getting involved with the BRICS alliance?
Well, one thing that I think of is there's really no disadvantage for them. So, most of these nations use the U.S. dollar as a reserve currency, most of their central banks. And for a long time, they did all their trade in the U.S. dollar. Well, the U.S. dollar has become, increasingly devalued, especially since the COVID years. So the last 5 years now, 5+ years. And so these nations are looking, one, to have something else to secure their central banks. That's why a lot of them happen to be buying gold as well. And they're also looking to strengthen their own currencies and have more flexibility, less susceptibility to sanctions. The U.S. has a large amount of influence on the world. And it's not just because of our military. It's also because of the U.S. dollar being the world's reserve currency for so many years. And we've been able to use that influence to put pressure on Russia, for example, when they got into this war with Ukraine, and we put sanctions on them. We've had sanctions against Iran for many years, trying to put pressure on them to, do things a little bit differently the way that we want them to do it. And countries are starting to realize that now that BRICS has such good footing, that joining BRICS can give them additional advantages and leverage that they don't have if they're just relying on the U.S. dollar. So I think that's a big part of it. And you're right, BRICS has grown. I think there's maybe 10 or 11 official full members now, and now another 10 or so partner nations. And that's what's interesting to me, is that BRICS is now, in order to expand things, they're opening it up to other partner nations, and they don't have all the same requirements that they would have to become full-fledged members. So they get to kind of work their way in. It's like a try it before you buy it, I guess, maybe would be a way of saying it. And so they're opening their arms and trying to bring in more and more nations. And then supposedly there's another 20 or 30 nations that are expressing interest to join. So, this organization of 10 firm members now could very easily become 50 members in the next year or two, with all of the action and excitement they have going on currently.
Sure. Well, I know a lot of people might look at this list too of these nations and say, they're not really in terms of global commerce what you would consider to be like powerhouse nations. Okay, Belarus, sure. Bolivia, Cuba, Kazakhstan, Malaysia, Nigeria, go down the list. However, what it is, it's a chipping away at the use of dollars, number one. But number two, as the old adage or saying goes, there are strength in numbers. And to your point, ultimately they have really nothing to lose for the most part. They just really have more to gain, because already these nations that are, again, not these financial or economic powerhouses that have aligned themselves with BRICS, they've seen an immediate improvement or strengthening of their local or domestic currency. And they have the covering of BRICS, the alliance, these powerhouse nations who are going to kind of protect them against what could be some sweeping tariffs or whatever else that may have been imposed by the United States. So this is, I think this is a much more serious situation and threat than really the average person might understand, or the credit the average person may give this situation. Now, going on to our next article here, this kind of speaks to it as well. There are 80 plus countries, this from Watcher Guru as well, 80 plus countries de-dollarize as the yuan, the rupee, the ruble replaced the US dollar. And so, originally going back several months, a year or two ago, as we were talking about BRICS and how they still are talking about how to launch their own BRICS currency. Even though that hasn't fully taken shape yet, what they have figured out is how to take their existing currencies and make it work effectively within the confines of the BRICS alliance. And the consequence of that is, as it says here, is they're really enabling themselves to, they're not completely de-dollarized yet, but they really are moving closer to that than not. And that's where I think this is this is something that should be a concern to really every one of us, because if this de-dollarization occurs and the dollar no longer becomes the reserve currency, things like our retirement accounts, our savings, our investment accounts, Lord knows what it'll do to our real estate market. The ripple effect that's going to have throughout our local or domestic economy here in the United States, I think, could be frightening.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, people are used to, at least let's say the last 20 or 30 years, for the most part, if you had the US dollar and you traveled anywhere else in the world, you were kind of king, right? Everybody wanted the US dollar, and the exchange rate for the US dollar was really to our benefit, right? Well, that's already, just in the last couple of years, that has flipped quite a bit with the euro. It's gone from $1 getting you like $1.20 in euros to now the opposite. You give $1 and you get about 80 cents, 80 euros, and so that's just in a 2-year period of time too. And I know this because of some family I have that use the euro over in Greece. So it can shift very quickly. And the other thing is too, Russia and China now are doing almost all of their trade, about $240 billion a year, just between the yuan and the ruble. And they don't even have the payment system put together yet, their digital payment system. So this is just business as usual for them using their own currencies. They've been able to cut out $240 billion a year that in trade that would have circulated through the US dollar. And so that is going to have all kinds of ripple effects, especially as it grows. And when you consider BRICS already controls about half the trade in their currencies around the world, as they grow and that goes to 60% and then 70, 80%, it can happen very quickly. So it's not necessarily an overnight change. I don't think we're going to see this number just skyrocket in the next 30 to 60 days. But I think over the next 3 to 5 years, this is going to be a growing story, and we're going to continue to feel the pain in our pocketbooks here when we go buy things at the grocery store and the electronics store, because so much of that stuff comes from outside of our borders.
Sure. Well, we're already, feeling that's already started to kind of take root. And, you kind of touched on the euro as well. And that's something, if and when, and there's been a little bit of interest being communicated back and forth by European nations with this BRIC alliance. And that in and of itself could be a very, very crippling effect, because, again, it's not like the old days where, if the UK was looking to do something and the United States had to take a posture or position against them, that was a discussion that would happen. When you talk about having the full support of the BRICS alliance, then you're basically picking a fight with somebody, but that person has 30 people that are right behind them there to support them.
That's right.
And the United States, for the most part, and this is what has made our nation so strong financially and otherwise, is we were like the Goliath out there. But the problem with that is that we are kind of the only one representing or supporting ourselves at this point. And so that puts us in a very compromised position. All right. Well, thank you, Chris.
Yes,
and for those of you tuned in, thank you for doing so. If you'd like more information on this, I would also encourage you to get a copy of our Secret War on Cash report, get information on putting retirement savings into gold, getting your just general investment accounts that you have diversified into gold and silver as well. You can call us at 1-800-289-2646 or text us there for some free information, or visit us online at www.swissamerica.com. Other than that, have a great rest of your day. If you're not subscribed, please do so. We'll talk to you real soon.
Take care.